Imagine a night so still that even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, the sky over northern Ukraine cracked open with a brilliant blue flash, a light so unnatural and otherworldly, those who witnessed it said time felt suspended. This was no ordinary glow. It marked the beginning of one of the most complex, tragic, and secretive disasters in human history, Chernobyl. But what if everything we thought we knew about that night was only the surface? What if that flash was not just an accident of physics, but a clue to something deeper, something concealed behind layers of military secrecy, government manipulation, and human sacrifice? April 26, 1986. Just after 1:23 a.m., reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. Officially, the disaster was the result of a flawed safety test and a series of catastrophic technical misjudgments. But eyewitnesses, including plant workers and local residents, reported not one but two distinct explosions. And in between them, a hovering blue light, suspended in the sky like a silent witness to something extraordinary. The Soviet explanation was swift and mechanical, a steam explosion followed by a hydrogen blast. But the blue light? Never mentioned, never documented, never explained. Years later, scientists began to revisit the events of that night, and their findings raised unsettling questions. One researcher in Sweden detected xenon-133, a radioactive isotope usually only produced in nuclear detonations, hundreds of miles from the plant. Even more troubling, this isotope appeared in areas untouched by the known radioactive plume. The implication? A force far stronger and more sudden than a standard reactor failure. A nuclear detonation, small perhaps but unmistakable. If that's true, the narrative of Chernobyl as an industrial accident may have always been a cover story, concealing the reality of an uncontrolled chain reaction with implications far beyond civilian technology. The idea that such a detonation occurred within a civilian reactor site would have been politically catastrophic. Thus, it was buried under layers of bureaucracy and sanitized science. But that was only the beginning. 2 days after the explosion, a quiet order was given to Yuri Israel, head of the Soviet Hydrometeorological Service. A radioactive cloud, visible only on classified military maps, was drifting steadily toward Moscow. Evacuation was politically impossible. Panic was unacceptable. So a single directive was scribbled on a report. Make it rain. It wasn't a metaphor. What followed was a meteorological operation so audacious it blurred the lines between science and warfare. Strategic bombers, aircraft once designed to deliver nuclear warheads, were reconfigured to carry silver iodide. Their mission was to intercept the cloud and force it to dump its radioactive payload over rural land before it could reach the capital. On April 28th, the skies over Belarus turned an eerie yellow. Then came the rain, black, dense, clinging. Not water, but poison. Radiation rained down on farms, schools, entire villages. Belarus became the buffer zone. Moscow remained untouched. The human cost never acknowledged. Simultaneously, a second weather mission launched in the opposite direction. This time, the goal was to prevent rain. The Pripyat River, if flooded with radioactive runoff, would carry toxins downstream and contaminate one of the largest freshwater networks in Eastern Europe. Civilian aircraft were outfitted with a dry chemical cocktail, Cement 600. It absorbed moisture from the clouds, creating an artificial drought over Ukraine. This act of atmospheric manipulation damaged ecosystems irreversibly. Rivers evaporated, wetlands dried to cracked earth, algae blooms suffocated lakes, entire species vanished, all to prevent a single storm. Silencing the truth. While the skies were controlled, another battle was being fought on the ground, a battle to control the narrative. On the morning of the explosion, a photographer named Igor Cohen was rushed into a helicopter. He had no mask, no training, only his camera and a gut instinct that what he was about to see would be historic. His photos, mostly destroyed by radiation, left only one surviving image, a haunting frame of the shattered reactor, bathed in radioactive dust. Another photographer, Anatoly Raskazov, was sent by the plant itself. His images, clear, chilling, and unmistakable, were immediately seized. He was silenced. His negatives never returned. Their testimonies, however, lived on through quiet whispers and fragmented memories. But perhaps the darkest secret lay not in the air, or in the film, but in the food. In the weeks after the meltdown, the Soviet government initiated a livestock roundup of unprecedented scale. Tens of thousands of animals from the contaminated zone were slaughtered, but instead of disposal, their meat was processed, and worse, blended with clean meat in state factories under a policy called dose dilution. Inspectors with handheld Geiger counters were told to scan quickly and say little. Many cried on the job, fully aware that they were sending radioactive food to grocery shelves. This wasn't a decision born of ignorance, it was policy, directed from above. To waste food was unthinkable in the Soviet economy, so they redefined what was safe. By the end of 1987, some facilities could no longer manage the deception. One plant quietly loaded 4 train cars with radioactive meat and sent them south. Georgia refused the shipment. Moldova turned it away. Kazakhstan would not accept it. The cars were finally abandoned near the village of Pisky. To this day, no one knows if their contents were ever destroyed or consumed. But the story doesn't end there. Thousands of tons of contaminated food had already been distributed, hidden in plain sight, masked by manipulated data and falsified reports. The lingering legacy. Meanwhile, as international media speculated about reactor design flaws and operator mistakes, a classified military operation unfolded. Near the plant was a Cold War-era missile base equipped with 3 live nuclear warheads. With fallout engulfing the site, Soviet commanders knew they had to act. A convoy of 30 military trucks rolled out under cover of night. Their drivers, unaware of their cargo, were led by Lieutenant Colonel Viktor Shev. The Geiger counters in their cabs clicked louder with each kilometer. The warheads were successfully removed, but not without cost. Within months, many drivers became ill. One died before year's end. The trucks were never used again. They were parked at the edge of Borisov Air Base, still radioactive, still silent, still waiting. The deeper you dig into the Chernobyl story, the more it unravels. Not just as a disaster but as a political labyrinth of decisions made in silence, operations erased from the record, and victims buried not just in the soil but in secrecy. The radioactive fallout was only the first wave. What followed was a flood of lies, cover-ups, and sacrifices made in the name of stability. Chernobyl didn't end in 1986. Its effects linger in rivers, in bones, in classified files, and in the stories some still whispered, some still sealed. We may never know the full truth, but by peeling back these layers, we move closer to it. Because history isn't just what's remembered, it's also what's erased. And sometimes the most powerful truths are the ones no one was ever meant to uncover. The legacy of Chernobyl is not merely a cautionary tale of nuclear negligence. It is a study in the lengths institutions will go to preserve control, and the quiet resilience of those who dared to tell the truth, even when no one was listening.